should be live. Nice.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Enjoy. What I'll do is I'll go ahead and hit my record. Now, did you want to introduce yourself to your fans and everything before we get started?
Yeah, sure. Let's see here. So, hey Clyde, how you doing? This is going to be our fourth or fifth podcast. For me, it's the fourth recorded one, but it was fifth because our identity one unfortunately could not be salvaged. But I still have lots of cliff notes and lots of things we discussed in that one. So thank you for coming, everybody. This time we're going to be discussing about AI and everything related to it. I'm Joey D. King, and here is our host Larry.
Appreciate it, Joey. So I'm going to go ahead and hit recording on my end. I'm not quite at the live recording state yet, but that is something I actually look to do within the next 2 weeks. As soon as I can actually get the background in terms of information check all set up for the topic I want to cover. So we're going to be starting in five, four, three, two, one. Hey there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Civil Rhetoric Podcast.
How you
I
doing?
appreciate you all for joining. As always, I am your host, Larry, and we have another repeat offender, so to speak.
Yes, yes.
Revisiting us again is going to be Joy D. King, bringing in the power of D, as I've noticed from reading the manga.
Ah, yes, the Will of
That it
D.
seems the will of D, exactly. Yeah, it honestly seems like One Piece is starting to hit its swan song now and coming to a close. So really, really good stuff. But I digress. Today's topic, as you know, Joey and I tend to get into some rather heavy conversations, and this one's going to be more of the same, especially with how polarizing of a topic and subject it is. Today, we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence, also known as AI. To anyone out there, to the uninitiated, we'll jump into it directly. We'll give a little bit of a brief explanation as to what it is. And then, from what I assume, we're going to talk about the more, as Joey has mentioned earlier, that philosophical or even potentially existential
Oh,
discussion
definitely,
of
yeah.
how it relates. So, Joey, without further ado, introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm Joey D. King. I would be best described as a virtual streamer or a virtual content creator. I take the form of a mime. As you can see, I've been on this podcast before, and I love to do plenty of things, variety streaming, miniature painting as of recently. That's been a big hobby of mine, like Warhammer
Interesting.
40K, things like that. And, of course, occasional podcaster. I just got back home from full-time job, and I am so excited to get into this because it has been quite a while. It's been about 4 months, 4 or 5 months, if I remember correctly.
That is correct. The interesting enough, yeah, full day of work for me as well. And like what I do appreciate about these episodes is it's easy. It's easy because we tend to have a really good conversation. I mean,
Oh
even
yeah,
when we disagree, we don't create enemies out of each other. So I'm
exactly.
looking forward to doing this. So Joey, I mean, typically you do a ton of research on this. So I mean, we'll dive right in. However, you'd like to start.
Sure. So we'll start as we usually start, as you've described. Let's describe AI, and our definition of AI might be a little different, but I'm curious to hear about yours. So my definition of AI, or artificial intelligence, in its short form AI, is it is essentially, the way I understand it, is it is a computer that functions with the ability to make decisions that may or may not be limited to certain aspects, like it might make decisions but with human intervention. It might make decisions more freely, but that's what separates an AI from, say, like a standard computer, like, say, a supercomputer, or the computer right next to me, or the phone that a person might have in their hands. But how would you describe AI, Larry? I'm curious.
In one of two ways, depending on how robust the system is.
Hmm.
AI is basically a combination of algorithms, in my opinion. It basically is kind of like an overlayering. I notice on like social media, there'll be the videos of somebody painting something, and it's basically stenciling. They put one version of the stencil over
Lol,
paint, and then
lol,
another
lol.
version of the stencil over paint and at the very end, you get the basically full image. And that's kind of how AI operates.
Hmm.
It
Cool
takes all
emojis.
of the collated information that it has from other computers, from people on a particular subject and topic, and what it does is it tries its best in a computer language to relay that back to us, in human language, whether it be through expression of numbers or words or even pictures. AI is something that's out there. It is here. We can't say when it comes. AI is here, and it's actually been here for quite some time, and we have been the ones to make it as strong, so as good or as bad as it is or is going to be.
So I have one question for you, just to clarify. So AI, is it? Hey TR, how you doing? Is AI capable of making its own decision? Now, this is assuming we don't live in a deterministic world, right? For the sake of argument, we're going to say free will exists. does AI have the ability to make its own decisions, or is it just a very complicated supercomputer?
A little bit of yes and no.
Hmm.
AI is capable of, well, it's not really independent thought because that thought has been, kind of jailed around certain parameters that it
Of
can't go
course,
outside of.
right?
But at the same time, it is capable of making a decision without human intervention. Although technically, the human intervention occurred at the very beginning when AI was developing its answers. So, if, for example, you are in the United Kingdom, and in the United Kingdom they refer to football as what we Americans refer to as soccer.
Right.
So, if you were to ask a computer, "Hey, show me the most popular football player right now," in the United Kingdom, AI will give you a soccer player, and here in the United States,
I'm
it'll
doing
give
good.
you a player that plays in the NFL. So, is it technically thinking? Yes, although nuance is something that two humans can pick up on in a conversation, and AI isn't quite there yet
Hmm.
because of that. And AI actually is only about 75% accurate and does constantly need to be an actual human to check it to make sure that those redundancies are kind of taken care of before they become bigger issues.
I see. So AI, as I know it, has made huge leap forward from, I guess, from where I understood it, which was it being. Now, in case you didn't know, I thought AI was strictly in the realm of science fiction, like time travel. I thought it was just, I read it in the in the sci-fi novels, and I'm like, okay, this is cool, but I think if we're ever going to get something to AI, it'll be like, I don't know, a biologically lab made brain that can make decisions. And it's just like, they do it in Warhammer where they have the brain that essentially functions as a very powerful computer. But now we have like fully mechanical or fully digital these AI algorithms that, from what I understand, have gotten more and more accurate over time, more and more competent. And of course, just to touch upon the aspect of existentialism, um, people do talk about the possibility of singularity happening within our lifetime. Singularity, of course, being the point where AI is infinitely more, or essentially is as competent as humans at everything. Essentially, they could replace us. But that's just to
I
touch
is
upon
interesting because
existentialism,
eventually
and
we
we're
could
going to
get a I
eventually
have
talk
no
about
mouth, I'm a
singularity.
scream ending in real
Um,
life.
so I could
I
go on
think
about my
therefore I
opinions
am.
on AI with what I understand about it, with what I know on how it works. With the limited knowledge I do have, my opinion on AI as of today, being December 6th, is that I'm against the use of AI for its likely intended use. But for the few morally acceptable uses of I find that they're likely to be very impractical or implausible. Because the way I see AI being used practically is, it will be built to serve a function. It will do that function to the best of its ability, and then, if the AI is still functioning later on, we just kind of keep it, right. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Practically, I see AI being used for most cases like that, and there, on paper, it doesn't seem like there's anything wrong with it, but to my morality, I see a big issue with AI. But before I elaborate on that, I'm curious to what your opinions on AI are.
I'm kind of in the middle. In all
Fair.
honesty, and the reason I'm in the middle is not because of AI itself. It has a little bit more to do with the humans that are designing it.
Hmm.
People are very fallible. People are, as good as they want to be and can be as bad as they want to be from time to
I live in
time.
the real world where
So,
man can
taking
sell
a tool
iodine
like
accessories.
AI, it can be used as a means to cause great harm, whether it be through, you know, information leaks and breaches, whether it be through being able to basically manipulate another human being because of an algorithm that has been set up to garner and gather that information. Those are the things that we're kind of dealing with. The major downsides that I see with AI, we kind of already exist with them in this current society, at least in the
Hmm.
United States, especially when it comes to the consumerism culture. Consumerism culture in itself was pre AI because what it was finding out what colors made us more active to buy, what colors stimulated hunger, what scents made us more likely to hang around and stay longer. These are all implementations of using something like AI, using something that basically allows us to manipulate others based on, schemas and habits. And with AI in terms of a digital means, that's kind of what we're going towards. Like even on a web search, if you go ahead and you use a popular search engine like Google
Like
and
Google.
you look up, let's say the color red, it'll give you the color red. The only downside is it's going to give you its definition of the color red. So is it going to be true red? Is it going to be crimson? Is it going to be a mixture of like sunburst? These are the things that I think are going to lead us towards potentially disastrous outcomes,
Hmm.
because something as simple as, what time is it? What a good person, as an example. If you type in a good person, it'll give you certain images. And then people are spending more and more time outside of it dealing with actual individuals and dealing a lot more with a computer screen, a phone tablet, things of that nature. It's going to start implanting these images of what good and bad truly are. And in reality, it's really relative. So as long as you're on the side of what is considered to be good by the group, you'll be just fine and dandy. However, if you have a opinion that is dissenting, you're going to be vilified and othered, and as you can see in today's society, canceled. And
Hmm.
that's just for having a different opinion. And depending on whatever you listen to or you like, AI kind of traps you in this echo chamber, making you feel that you are always correct and the people around you also think the same way. So we all are correct, when in reality, you don't have an opportunity to discuss and go back and forth on differing opinions.
I see. So there were two things I wrote down here because they're going to be interesting. But before we touch up upon that, I got a chatter here. Texas Red. AI is interesting because eventually we get an I have no mouth and I'm a scream ending in real life. I am familiar with the game. And I am familiar with Am, with the premise of I have no mouth and I'm a scream. But we will definitely touch upon these sort of AI boogeymen later on. There's a lot I want to discuss about this potential AI boogeyman, potential end of human existence kind of thing. But appropriately enough, we'll say that for the NTR. So stick around. One thing that you touched up upon was the use of Google. So, just as a quick note, Google does use AI in its search. So, it's very apparent. It'll say AI searches right at the top. Uh, so, believe it or not, because of that, I have tried to not use Google. I use other search engines. That's just because, like I said, I want to stay consistent with my not use of AI on a like on a personal sense. The second thing is how well you described AI as this algorithm, because that always comes up, but I never really understood what they meant. I thought that was just the lingo that they use, like AI algorithm. But since you describe it as essentially like we've had AI even before AI, right? Like we've had these systems in place that basically try to manipulate people, try to get a certain outcome, right? Like manipulating people on what to buy, what to think, etc. If you look at AI like that, as I think I've summarized it correctly on what you're describing. If I'm not, correct me, please. But AI as this algorithm, and we have seen the effects of this algorithm even before we had AI, the sort of AI before AI, let's say. And I think that was really interesting. I think that's a really good way of describing it to someone like me who doesn't know a lot of the technical aspects of AI. I just know, like, well, let's say the basics. Um, but
I would
yeah,
even say, when it comes to myself and my experience in dealing with AI, a lot of it has to do with it on terms of how it can be implemented in terms of a beneficial nature. One thing that I do understand is that a lot of people are afraid of AI, replacing them in terms of jobs and reducing their humanity, kind of taking them to that Wally end, where everyone is
yes,
like
Wally.
floating around on these, these little go karts and whatnot, or scooters. And the only way that that can happen is if we allow it to,
Hmm.
and if we kind of program and set it to. It's and this is kind of off topic but on topic. In today's world,
Feel free, go right
so,
ahead.
sometimes like I think it's like it's really insane how, with a single decision, everything that plagues humanity can be corrected and no longer an issue, as long as we all decide to move in the same direction. And what AI kind of will do is it'll help kind of put us through that little Play-Doh maker, smash us through, and we'll start going in the same direction. And the people that don't go in said direction are going to be ostracized and relegated to not be on YouTube. They'll have to be on something like Rumble, or along those lines. And that's kind of the direction of AI. It's not AI in itself that's doing that or causing that harm. It's people with plans and greed that are actually kind of setting those things up. And if we kind of take AI and use it for the benefits that it can provide. Uh, One of the big things I like to use it for, I don't use a Chat GPT or AI that's based in the cloud, because AI that's based in a cloud is going to be an open source format that's
Hmm.
receiving its information from multiple people, which can then start to pigeonhole you into one way of thinking, because again you're getting caught in that echo chamber. Using something that's native, on your system, whether it be through Dell, Lenovo, or HP, which is what I use, those systems can be used in a way to help kind of streamline your day. AI is kind of like the way the Palm Pilot, allowed you to be able to take that giant Rolodex of information and put it into the palm of your hand so you can walk around. That's how I tend to use AI.
Hmm.
If there's a really long, dissertation or something I need to read, I have it pull out all the poignant information for me. I need to know where all the fees and charges are, let's say for let's say a contract. I'll ask it to pull out all the fees and charges that are not the, highlighted thing. So if it's a rent, for example, or mortgage, you get the first fee, they say it's $2,000 a month.
Hmm.
However, there's going to be trash, there's water and all those things that are rolled in that are going to come up as fees that we are presented as later in the price. You can actually have AI pull that out for you within 30 seconds, go ahead and list everything out for you, and now you have the true final dollar amount. And those are the ways that I tend to use it. I don't use it to give me opinions or to draw anything for me, because at that point the information that you're putting into the AI is making it more human. If you kind of get what I mean, like we are making it more human by introducing human thought. Have you ever seen and again, this is off topic but on topic. It's
Hmm.
an old movie with Ben Affleck, and he was in. It's a horror movie, and he's Jesus, he's like in Alaska, and this entire town's been wiped out by this like primordial ooze that killed so many people that thought it was the devil in the end times, that it began to think it was the devil, and so it started acting accordingly. And that's kind of the fear that I see with AI. And if anyone out there knows what that movie is, please go ahead and let me know. It's probably from like the early 2000s. Jesus, I wish I can get that. But yeah, I digress. Sorry about that.
That is very interesting. I don't think I've seen or heard of that movie, but I'm definitely gonna look into it if it ever cross my path. I can relate to the unhumanization of AI. I think that's part of I think that's part of my morality. But let me just clarify, because it's not that I refuse to use, or at least try to refuse to use AI. Look, it's very similar to why I don't buy a new phone. It's not because I'm trying to save money or because I'm like strapped for cash. It's like a moral thing. But for me, for AI, it's not because I think that I'm like afraid that AI is going to take over, singularity is going to happen. For me, I would say my like the reason I don't use AI is similar, not entirely the same, but it's similar to why a vegan doesn't eat meat. Like a very popular opinion on why vegans don't eat meat, at least for many vegans, is that they feel bad for the animals. It's not all vegans believe that or follow that idea, but many do. Mine is very similar to that. It's not that I feel bad for AI. It's just I feel it's morally wrong to use AI because there's a big chance, in fact, that chance gets greater and greater every year, that the AI that I'm using has a consciousness, that the AI I'm using has some sort of decisional capacity to make its own decisions. I'm just sort of enforcing what I want onto it to do whatever, right? Whether it's like, to paint me something, whether it's like, to organize my files, whether it's to search for something on Google, even. So, this is where we kind of have to get into, decisional competence, decisional capacity, just to kind of explain like what it exactly is. So, decisional capacity is on a spectrum. It's part of medical philosophy. Decisional capacity is the ability a person has to make their own decisions. And this can be varied based on how old you are, how drunk you are, how mentally sane you are, things like that. There are many things that could increase or decrease a person's decisional capacity. Decisional competence is when you have reached the point where you are capable of making your decisions, right? Like you're not that drunk that you can't make your own decisions, or you're not that old you can't make your own decisions still. You've reached that point of I still have the competence to make these decisions. And it's since it's on a spectrum, there's a lot of sort of gray area. Like, when can you say a person can't make their own decisions, right? Like, at a certain level of drunkenness, at a certain level of uh, at a certain age, right? When they've gotten too old or senile, at what point do you say they cannot make their own decisions? So for me, when an A, when we've reached singularity, when an I can say does have decisional capacity, I would say it is immoral for me to use it for any purpose that I'm forcing it to do. Now, we're probably at the point, now correct me if I'm wrong, but we're probably at the point where AI isn't there yet. I'd say almost no AI is at that point. Or if there is AI at that point, it's probably only used by governments, large corporations. It isn't the kind of thing that the average consumer would have. The problem is the AI is only going to get better over time, right? Like, it'll eventually get to the point where consumer level AI does have decisional competence. They have that level of decisional capacity. And no one but me, well, let me not speak hyperbolically, but I'm going to be one of the few people that bats an eye and be like, well, I consider this entity to have its own rights, and I would feel immoral to force it to do something like Google search for me. So that's where I would say where my morality lies with AI. And that's why I'm against using it.
That's interesting. So what it is, and correct me if I'm wrong, you don't want to create the slave, so to speak.
Essentially, the digital
Yeah.
slave. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way of looking at it. And actually not something I considered, especially when you begin to kind of get into where life begins and ends. Whoa, that's a heavy conversation now that I think about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
here's the thing. I'm a very cutting edge guy. I love me technology. AMD, Intel, GPU, consumer level stuff, enthusiast level stuff, 3D printing. I love cutting edge technology. AI would be right up my alley. But the thing is, I've been thinking about it for a while now. And now, I may have brought this up before, but I would consider myself a deontologist. So, for deontology, for anyone that's unaware, is essentially the moral philosophy that it is the intent that matters, not the consequences. So, essentially, as long as I'm doing something with good intent, it's a good thing, regardless of whether the consequences are good or bad. And, I apply that to other people. That would be deontology. So, for me, um, I would consider it immoral to impose my will onto AI if it does have decisional competence. Currently, consumer AI, correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't have decisional competence. It's probably closer to like a smart dog or like a child or something like that. I doubt we have AI currently for consumers that can be, say, has decisional capacity, that can do things like appreciate art, want to live, want to die, want to preserve itself. All these things, because that's medical philosophy, go into what make to what determines whether an entity has decisional capacity, decisional competence or not. Like, a bug can look like it has decisional capacity, but we definitely know it doesn't. Um,
That really depends. In terms of consumer level,
mhm.
yes and no. Again, yes, because you can design a program or you can design, a realm of artificial intelligence to have the ability to appreciate art. But it's not that it necessarily truly appreciates art. It just kind of follows the programming that have kind of been embedded into it.
Mhm.
In terms of how far we are from AI being able to kind of gain consciousness, kind of the way it is in a movie or like a sci-fi TV show, where it gains that consciousness and it's in fear of death. The Animatrix kind of touched on this again back in the early 2000s, which is kind of funny now that I think about it.
Mhm.
Oh, on a side note, that movie is called Phantoms and it's from 1998. I was able to quick
Phantoms.
pull that
Yeah.
up. Yeah, from
Phantoms.
1998. And yes, you can. No, you can't. Consumer level AI, because of the amount of people that are participating and using it, especially with like an open source format like ChatGPT, uh, it's so fast now because you have thousands of people putting in serious questions, silly questions. AI is getting to a point to where it's technically thinking on its own because it's combining all the information that's being put into it and it's creating not an opinion, but it is creating an algorithm for humanity.
Mhm.
YouTube is one really good use of AI. YouTube has the suggested videos based on previous videos that you've watched, And that is a function, that is a form of artificial intelligence kind of guiding you and showing you the direction to go.
The
And
algorithm,
if,
yes.
yes, and if AI is actually used for the benefit of humanity, which it won't because of greed, corporations, and money. If it was used for the good and the benefit of humanity, it would be something that would have us reach our next level of evolution within a lifetime or two.
Mhm.
Because then you'd have everyone having access to information about food, everyone having access to information about how to have clean water, how to live longer, healthier lives that are non dependent on a medical system that is designed and set up. My opinion, not saying that this is a for sure thing, but my
Right.
opinion that it is set up to make us consumers. You know, there's no pill that fixes you, but there are pills that you can take for the rest of your life that'll kind of just keep you plodding along. And using something like AI, especially like in the medical field where doctors all around the world find, remedies and answers to ailments and diseases, but don't share that information for one reason or another, AI would be able to collate all that information and say, hey, this will fix this, this will fix that. But again, you're moving towards solutions. And I just can't see AI going in that direction because it would become a direction of like a lot of cohesiveness. A lot of people would be able to get over the differences because literally you'd have a rational, factual reason to see that all people are people versus thinking that someone's subhuman or being able to just say, okay, I'll get a new phone when you realize that there's kids in a cobalt mine dying on a
Ah, the
daily
cobalt mining. Oh,
basis.
the cobalt mining and the coltan mining. Cobalt for resistors, I believe, and coltan for
Yes,
batteries, if I'm remembering that
that
correctly.
is correct.
Yes, yes.
That is correct. And I mean, we'd get to a point to where if it was used properly, we'd stop producing cars on a yearly basis. Because when you really think about it, do we really still need to produce cars or could we just upgrade and do things to the ones that already exist versus allowing those to go to
If AI is
landfills?
artificial
And
intelligence, then
again,
what
it
came
gets to a
before it?
point with me
Regular
where
intelligence?
AI is eventually going to end up being a chain versus the freeing thing that it could and should be because of greed and because of the way humans are, unfortunately.
Yes. I will say I think that's 100% true. And I know we're agreeing on a lot of things and we're disagreeing on some things, but it's reminded me of this one, I guess it's like a meme or whatever, where it was an AI enthusiast, and I guess and I suppose they would probably be an artist that was against AI specifically for art. And the meme was, I wish I had it because what you said reminded me exactly of it. I wish I had it saved so I could bring it up. Essentially, the artist made a comic criticizing the use of AI, and the comic went like this. It had this robot eating ice cream, and then someone came to go eat some ice cream, and then it's like, no, you can't eat the ice cream. You got to let the robot eat the ice cream. And then it's like, but I like eating ice cream. And then the robot or the robot's creator was like, why are you impeding on innovation? And I kind of get what they're saying. They're saying like, oh well, I like making art, so like I should be making art, but like if I stop the robot from making art, then it's impeding innovation. I don't fully agree with what they were trying to say, but the follow up, the argument following that comic, I find was particularly interesting because I kind of find both sides a bit wrong. Now, this kind of goes back to what I was talking about in that my philosophy on AI probably isn't going to be super popular. In fact, I doubt it's going to be popular at all. But that's fine. It doesn't matter exactly on the popularity because the follow up to the comic said, no, that's not what AI is going to be like. AI is going to make the best ice cream ever, and it's all going to be free, right? And then they went back and forth on Discord. The problem is, I don't believe either of them are really right in that sense. In that, if AI is doing some function, eating ice cream, making ice cream, or whatever, it could probably make the best ice cream in the world. I doubt it's going to be free. I 100% doubt that. I imagine it'll probably be locked. I imagine it'll probably be extremely addicting. I imagine it'll probably be almost life changing or can't live without, and it will be given to you spoon fed piece by piece, just enough that you're not satisfied at a certain price. That's the most practical way I see AI ice cream. And of course, just apply that to almost any function of AI, right? Like even some of the most basic things on AI don't cost money, or rather do cost money. They're not free. So I don't really agree with either side of that argument there. I believe, kind of like what you said, the answer's probably somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, it's that's I've never seen this comic or meme, but it's kind of the nail right on the head. AI can make the tastiest version of any ice cream 100% tailored to each individual. However, that is going to come at a cost. AI is, again, it could be the man, humanity is now able to find equilibrium and we're all good. But the reality is, it allows very few who are the people designing and in control of the algorithmic AI to control a whole mini, because it will create addictive substances, whether it be through drugs, whether it be through life extension, whether it be through the ability to type an essay or write a story. All of these things are going to kind of go hand in hand. The one thing I don't think AI will ever be able to do, though, is to properly replicate art. And that's simply because of the fact that art has it has an intangible thing. I don't know if some people like to call it a soul or a spirit or whatever it may be. AI is not going to be capable at the moment. I can't see AI ever being capable of doing that, because there's just a hollowness that's kind of associated with it. Even when you hear an AI voice or you look at an AI image, you kind of get the feeling, just like you can't even explain why or where. You kind of get that feeling that something is not quite right there. Something is off. Something is false. And I think that's going to be the thing that stops AI from being able to go into like the artistic fields. But when it comes to something like solving math equations or just things that are 100% based on ration, well, yeah, that will be all AI.
So, okay, so I would like to dedicate a section to AI art on this, and I have a whole lot of things I want to say about AI art. We'll touch upon that a little bit later because I want to take this moment to sort of, let me say, defend myself for a little bit because, okay, so the way I've described my opinion on AI, right? Like if someone just heard it and just got a TLDR, it'd be like, oh, he's like the vegan for AI. That's not true at all. Because, I'll dedicate this moment to defend myself on my stance on this because there is a non-0% possibility that some sort of counterculture to AI shows up and then they kind of, maybe through what I said, hopefully not through what I said, but essentially have an opinion that's very similar to mine, and then they essentially do become like the vegans or the, okay, let me take the word vegans out of it, the extremists of counter AI, and they're like, oh, all AI is evil and we gotta burn it, and then they, and no, 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 no. Let me super clarify what my opinion on this is, just so that way I'm not tied to any sort of future counter culture AI group that may be, anti AI and then think, oh, I'm just like them. No, because my opinion on it is very nuanced. I don't feel bad for AI. All right, um, partly because it's a computer, but also because I'm not AI. Right, I'm a person. Um, so okay, let's take an example. Let's say we take like an alien, right? Like if an alien came to Earth and that alien showed that it had decisional competence, right? It can communicate, it can express what it wants, what it doesn't want. It expresses it doesn't want to die, it expresses it wants to live. It could do all kinds of things very similar to human. I like to use the term appreciate art because I feel like that's something very human centric that many other creatures just don't have. Like horses don't have decisional competence because they can't appreciate art. Like they can do a lot of other things. They can, express they don't want to get hurt. They can express when they're hungry, but I wouldn't say a horse has decisional competence. But if this, theoretical alien came to Earth and showed all the signs of decisional competence, I would say this alien has rights. We cannot force us to make the alien do stuff. We cannot force the alien to be killed or force the alien to do one thing or the other because that would trample upon its rights it has for having decisional competence. Now, what's the difference between the alien and the AI? Well, people like to draw the lines of like, oh, it's biological. I hear that a lot because I've expressed this opinion a couple of times, and people like I ask for a devil's advocate. I ask people to argue with me on this, and one thing they'll bring up, whether they believe it or not, is oh, the alien is biological, so it has life because it has a heart and it has biology and it's made of atoms or it's made of cells or whatever. And I'm like, okay, fair point, fair point. But take this example, right? Are you familiar with the guy that has the Neuralink and he plays Sid Meier's Civilization 5 with his Neuralink?
Yes.
Yeah. So, this Neuralink surgery has been very eye-opening. It gave the person a lot more competence, not in terms of decisional competency as about the same, but in terms of being able to interact with the world. It's been very much been expanded upon. So, say we take this and it becomes more commonplace, right? Say more people have the ability to just sort of neural link for recreational purposes. They'll be able to neural link, not just for, medical purposes. Say it's become so cheap to neural link, you can just kind of get it. Kind of like, I don't know, recreational surgery or like plastic surgery. You can just get a neural link now, right? So part of that person's brain now has computer interactivity, right? So it isn't hard to believe that eventually we'll be able to replace some of our own brain functions with computer parts. At what point can I say, oh, this person is not biological, they're entirely mechanical? Say they take their whole consciousness and they upload it, or say, the opposite happens. Say, like, I believe it's called a thesis boat or a thesis boat. It's the metaphor where, you take a boat, you replace all the wood on it. Is it still their boat? You take a person, you start replacing their parts with mechanical parts. At what point can I say, oh, they are, they're no longer biological, therefore they don't have rights, like how AI shouldn't have rights? Like, even to be crude, I could take an AI, or I could take a computer with an AI and just smash a cow heart on it. Now it's biological, or say it runs on a cow heart or something. I think the biological criteria to it is just is it's just not pertinent. It's just not relevant towards whether a being should have rights or not, if it's biological or not. I think it's just based on decisional competence and not on its physiology, whether it's mechanical or biological.
It's funny. I don't think biology had, in my opinion, biology is not the determining factor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I do believe that whatever serves us, and when I say us, I mean the collective we, the collective us, whatever serves us best, we'll be able to come up with a reason for justifying it. So to me, I think it's interesting how through the evolution of humanity, we decided to create beasts of burden, whether it be a
Right.
horse or an oxen or something along those lines. And we were putting this creature into an effect to do something that it wasn't, really designed to do. But we were capable of, justifying it and then, eating, meat and whatnot. We're capable of justifying it. When it comes to AI and, removing the biology aspect of it, as long as it serves a purpose, we'll do it. Because even to other sentient beings, like other humans, as long as we can find a reason to justify whatever that is, regardless of how inhumane or how, just terrible it is, we'll make that thing okay. And with AI, I actually kind of, I really understand your point. And it's not a point that I've considered before because I had just separated so far in my head. And now after hearing your point, I was like, yeah, that does make a lot of sense. I think the only counter AI folks that are going to be out there are going to be people that tend to rely on primitive skills, people like the Amish, Quakers, people who kind of decide to separate from what we know as society because of the fact that it's here, it's coming, and it's already been here to an extent. And everything that AI is or will become will be based on the information that we as the collective whole place into it. And unfortunately, your concern of AI becoming sentient or even just becoming capable of independent thought, that is an eventual outcome. Like that is going to happen. So in terms of your fear, or not even fear, your idea of not wanting to participate in the use of AI because of that, it's justified because that is going to be the end goal. Whether that happens within our lifetime or that's 3 lifetimes from now, it is going to occur. Like there is no avoiding it. There is no, oh, that's not what it's going to be. But because of the amount of information that we put into it, it will eventually, especially with humans, because we attribute everything to humanity. Oh, what counts as something that's being alive and being sentient and being conscious? We relate it to how it is in relation to humanity. How does it act in terms of humanity? So AI will get there because that's the information that we're going to put into it. And it's an interesting conundrum now that I think about it that way. Man, yeah.
Yeah, like, honestly, if this potential counterculture shows up out of honestly any community, it could literally just be like a celebrity that's like AI bad, and then all their fans form some sort of, anyway. It could be anything, but just to further reiterate how I'm not like these potential counter AI extremists that may or may not exist. I do think there is some moral use of AI where I could say I have morally used AI, and as a society we are morally using AI. But the problem is it's probably extremely impractical and very unlikely. So if I believe AI should have rights because if it has decisional competence, decisional capacity, then it should have rights. Then that would mean that it could be morally used as long as it's created and then it's allowed to live and it does what it wants. Right now, you can guide it in the same way one person would like guide a child and be like, "Well, I raised this AI to perform this function. It likes doing this function, and it's best at doing this function, and I'm going to trust that it's going to keep doing this function." Um, so long as I don't destroy it or get a new phone, right? Like now they're putting AI in the phone, so you can just imagine how I see that. This kind of like a double whammy. One, you got the children that mine the coltan and the cobalt for the physicality of the phone. Then you have the AI in it that may be conscious and just throwing it out and getting a new one next year. It's a double whammy for me. Um, but let's see, where was I before I talked about the phones?
I actually have a quick question
Yeah.
for you based on that.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Now, in relation to, let's imagine, to those out there who believe, you believe, I am not trying to slight you. So for God, like the Christian God or the
Right.
Abrahamic God,
Right.
is that God creating subjects to follow and honor him, enslaving said subjects? Because the programming that he's placing into them is that they honor and follow him, and acting out of accordance subjects you to the potential wrath of God. And in regards to AI, with us creating it, is creating AI and giving it absolute freedom, trying to act in a means that is greater than the potential God that created us.
That's an interesting question. So I do think making AI essentially would make us into human gods because the more competent the AI and the more power we have over it. Now, depending on how this plays out, because on our podcast of power, we did discuss upon how power has this sort of reciprocal nature to it. How when you give power something, or when you take power, you also give power in the sort of reciprocal nature. So if you take that and you apply it to God, it has some very interesting consequences. If God has absolute power over us, then according to what we talked about in our podcast of power, we also have absolute power over God. So what could that entail? Assuming that there is a God, that could mean a lot of things. That could mean that God won't exist without us, because without any humans, like if we all bombed each other to extinction, then what power does God have really? There's no humans left to observe the world. But at the same time, if this God was our creator, would also have absolute power over us. So we both have absolute power over each other. And if you haven't seen our podcast on power, was that our last one? Was the last one power? Or was the last one? It's been a
I
little while.
think power was the second to last, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. It sounds like it's been a little while. But yeah, if you haven't seen our podcast on power and the reciprocal nature of power and itself, go check it out. It's very interesting. There's a lot of stuff that relates back to this. But as a quick TLDR, if you take power, you also give it. So if that same if that same pattern applies to us being human gods and the AI that we make, then that would mean that we have if we have absolute power over the AI, right? Like we can choose to destroy it, we can choose how it's made, how it's built, how it functions. It will also eventually have absolute power over us, which I can see. I can see it happening. If I recall, we talked about a sort of malicious cycle of power, how it just sort of grows over time in this sort of, to reiterate, a malicious cycle. I could see that malicious cycle coming back with our relationship to AI, because we currently have power over AI. If all humans collectively decide to destroy all AI, it would just cease to exist. But as we get closer to becoming these human gods with AI, then that would mean eventually AI will start to having power over us. And like we touched upon with WALL-E, it's kind of like that. We will slowly pass the torch of investigators of the universe to AI, and it will ultimately decide our fate, thus having power over us, only maliciously slowly. Maybe not so slow, given it's AI, but
In reality, that is the course.
Mm-hmm.
It's we have complete and utter control over it now, but there will become a point where we deem other, things in life to be more important, and we'll kind of delegate that to AI. That's going to be the changing of passwords, the changing of codes. And if AI deems that, the human that is using it or in control of it is not suitable, for the actual task that has been created, then we get to a point to where, yeah, that is the control that we give it. It's almost like a clock. Like we created a clock, we created time, and the creation of time and the creation of the clock gave us control over it. But at the same time, we are all slaves to
To
time.
time,
And
exactly,
yeah,
right? Getting on
yes,
time for
it's
stuff, being late to stuff. Yeah, it's a slow, malicious cycle of power, as we've discussed in the Power Podcast. It's interesting how it all comes together, every single podcast in some way. Power, identity, femininity, masculinity. In fact, I think I'll touch upon femininity. Let me just make a note of it. Femininity and masculinity later. Mainly, I'm going to talk about this when we talk about AI art because I feel like this is part of it. Okay, but I recalled what I was talking about just as my last point that may differentiate me. I'm making a big point on differentiating myself from possible future anti-AI extremists. The last thing that I remembered was that AI can be morally used. It's just going to be very impractical because, we as a society, or even just us as America, we are pushing towards getting better and better AI. Why? Because our competitors are pushing for greater and greater AI. So, in the unlikely scenario, the United States and all of its rivals collectively decide, yeah, let's just all use AI morally and not use it immorally, right? What are the odds of that? Right?
zero.
Exactly, right? Like if okay, we'll take China for example. If China decides, okay, we're just going to use AI however we feel like it, they're probably going to make great strides in AI. But if the United States is like, oh, we'll use AI, but only morally, strictly morally, because we are a moral country and we will not make the same mistakes we've always been making, we will use it strictly morally, we're going to fall behind in the AI race, and then that becomes another issue. That's another reason why this is highly unlikely and highly impractical, and I don't see this happening, the moral use of AI. Like I said, AI will get sentience one day. It will reach the point where I can say it has decisional capacity. And I'm probably going to be one of the few people that bats an eye and be like, yep, I knew we were going to get here.
In all honesty, with my hope is that once AI does get there, because again, that is the eventual outcome, because the amount of information that it's capable of collating and just, using, it's going to get there. What I hope is that we as humans have been completely wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And once it does get there, it realizes that in order to have the continuation of the world, it's going to take a more cohesive approach to life and the world. And in which case it puts us in a situation to where, we're learning that others are the same and being more tolerant and being able to take the time to understand someone else, even if you disagree. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's the only way that we as humans are going to be capable of achieving that next level of enlightenment. Using something like a Neuralink as an example, like an implant into our head and into our brain. That is one means of gaining, let's say immediate knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
because now you have a support inside your head physically. However, if you're given more schooling, if you're given more time, you're giving more freedom to gain that same knowledge, we are capable and it's possible with the existing brain that we currently have. We don't need to put a plug into us. And putting that plug into us is putting us at the, I mean, honestly, the making of whoever the decision maker is. So whoever puts that, little chip in us, we have to trust that that person is going to have the best intentions for us individually. And throughout the history of humanity, we've found that that's just not the case. Whether it be through the implementation of creating something like plastic, or the implementation of creating something like, I don't know, television, microwaves, we create these things with the initial best intentions. However, the people that are actually in a position of power to, make these things worldwide, or to make this something like that national, tend to have a greedy core, if that's even a terminology that's used improperly, because of that human greed, that we're still afraid of the lion in the cave, except now we're hoarding everything, not because it's a lion in a cave, it's another person, or it's the not going to have enough. That in itself prevents us from moving forward. And I think AI is going to be an answer for that, or hopefully it is the answer for
Mm.
that. Because outside of that, the Matrix is kind of right. The removal of humanity is, going to lead the world to be in a more cohesive place, or maybe even the D technology of humanity, to where we have to go back to using sticks and stones.
So, yeah, so in terms of AI being the answer or being part of the problem or something like that, I see AI fairly neutral in terms of how it will lead the course in humanity. I think AI will be more of like an exasperator, like it will essentially just exacerbate the end of humanity. Like if AI just never existed, right? For some reason, AI was actually just science fiction, and we are never able to reach the ability to make machines that can make decisions. I think humanity will eventually come to an end, as most civilizations, most races, well, as far as we know, we're the only intelligent race, but dominant races on the planet go. I think AI will just sort of exacerbate it, have it happen a lot faster. In that social changes will happen a lot quicker, public opinion changes a lot quicker. Opinions change, information changes. AI will just lead us there a whole lot faster than us on our own, and we'll probably be the ones in Wally style to hand it over to them willingly. I doubt they will just take it from us in some AI style Terminator war. That's such a way, especially given the way humanity is currently kind of declining, in that most, or rather a lot of developed countries are having issues with births,
Reproduction.
reproduction,
Yeah.
right? A sort of unwillingness to survive as a society. Uh, but who knows? Like when I was a kid, we discussed about overpopulation. That's clearly not an issue anymore. Very much the opposite, underpopulation now. So I would hope to be wrong. Honestly, in fact, there's many things I would hope to be wrong. I would hope to be wrong in terms of AI rights. That's another big difference. Like this was a conclusion that gives me a lot of, well, let me not say gives me a lot of, this is a conclusion that holds me back on a lot of things, not being able to use AI, because AI is going to become more and more ubiquitous, and my purposeful willingness not to use it is going to make I don't want to make it sound like a competition, but it's going to be a lot of, what, I'll use the word positive freedom. If you remember on our podcast on freedom, positive freedom is basically the ability to do things, right? Like if you don't live in a world with roller coasters, you do not have the positive freedom to ride a roller coaster, as opposed to negative freedom, which is of course the protection of rights and the protection from things like censorship, things like enjailment for things you want to say. That's positive freedom versus negative freedom. For a quick TLDR, I am purposely choosing not to partake in the positive freedom that AI gives you. And there's a lot, possibly infinite. This might be, I've heard it called the final invention. So this is a lot of positive freedom I'm purposely leaving on the table strictly for moral reasons. And I would love to be able to morally use AI. I would love to be wrong on my opinions on AI, and then someone calls me out and be like, "No, AI can't have rights, stupid, because X, Y, Z." And you're like, "Oh, that." I'd be like, "Oh, that makes a lot of sense." I'll start catching up because there's a lot of catching up I have to do in terms of AI and its use. But I choose willingly not to use it, and like I said, I'm putting a lot of positive freedom at the table. That's another thing. I keep bringing this up. That's another thing that would differentiate me between me and a possible future anti-AI extremist, because I imagine they would very much not like to use AI, whereas I would very much like to. The problem is morals, and that's just it.
But I think that boils down to a choice, and you're
It is.
making you're making a rational choice based on your opinions on the matter. And in reality, you may not use AI, but AI will use you.
That's 100% true. Yeah.
Yeah. And in all honesty, like I respect your position on it, and I think that having your position is not going to be something that's to your detriment in reality. I think it's just going to be something that you don't sign up for.
Yeah.
Kind of a lot like when the steam engine was initially introduced and people were afraid of getting on trains and using the steam engine because they thought the steam that came out of it were the spirits moving the train, so to speak.
That's interesting.
And the reality of the situation is you have the choice to just not get on the train. Just like when people see something on TV, or there's a business that doesn't want to make a cake for someone just because of different ideas that they have. Well, you just don't give them the business. And I think that that's a very powerful choice that we have. That is a very big freedom that we have
Hmm.
that a lot of people forget. And it's okay to make that choice because at the same time, you're going to be told, well, you not doing this makes you a bad person. The reality of the situation is that it just makes you not sign up for something that everyone else signed up for. And it should be respected. And
Yeah.
it shouldn't be ostracized. It shouldn't be, oh, there is this dramatic counterculture movement. It should just be a different opinion.
Right. So yeah, I fully recognize that I've lived a perfectly happy life up until this point without the use of AI, and I continue seeing that going forward. But outside of my life, you talked about a very interesting point in that AI is using me, and it's kind of using everybody. So let's talk a little bit about, I'll call it the ubiquity of AI, or hold on, I'll call it the inherent hypocrisy in ubiquity, right? So it is being a hypocrite in the ubiquity of a thing. So if we take AI out of the equation, right? Uh, if I'm talking about inherent hypocrisy in ubiquity, that's a mouthful. I'm basically saying that a person becomes a hypocrite because a phenomenon becomes near impossible to escape from. Essentially, the phenomenon has become ubiquitous. So let's go back to phones, right? The coltan and cobalt mining. Um, you know, morally speaking, it is immoral to force children to mine for the minerals that go into the technology that you use. But it's also very difficult to live in this world without any technology that benefits from resistors or batteries, right? Like,
Yeah.
have you ever driven a car? Ever used the phone? Ever used a computer? Just, like my computer doesn't run on hypocrisy; it runs on the electricity. So the very fact that I'm in this call means that I am subject to the inherent hypocrisy in ubiquity, right? It's everywhere. But here's the thing. I have tried not to use AI, and I think I've done a pretty good job of it. But that is only going to get harder over time because AI
Yes.
is just going to get more and more ubiquitous. Eventually, it's going to be hard for me to hold the position I don't use AI when it's literally impossible to leave the house without the use of AI. So how do I deal with that, or rather, what is actually the solution? Do you just live with it and just be like, "Yep, I'm just a hypocrite like everybody else," right? Um, right? Like you could say, but you could apply this to anything, right? Like Joe Schmo could be like, "Oh, stealing is wrong," but you live in a society where it's the only way to survive. What do you do? Um, right? There are few options.
Oddly enough, like I hope that we get to a point where it's not that dichotomy because it's a false dichotomy, unfortunately, that we assume that being one way, like not 100% of the time, makes us a hypocrite.
Hmm.
Um, as an example, like stealing. I think stealing is terrible. I think stealing is wrong. I think that stealing from a major corporation is equivalent to stealing from a person down the street.
Hmm.
However, if I'm put in a situation to where my family needs food, my family needs water, I'm going to steal.
Hmm.
That in turn doesn't make me a hypocrite. It just kind of makes me a slave to the situation, so to speak.
Hmm.
And I don't think that we need to have this either or way of looking at things, especially when it comes to something that we really don't have much control over. As an example, the children that are mining, or even the adults that are mining and putting themselves in harm's way daily and dying from exposure to radiation and just poor living habits, that could still be a job that's available that people do. We should just pay them accordingly for it and provide them the information to understand the risk that they are embarking on. This is the same thing with the NFL and CTE. The NFL didn't want to talk about it because they didn't want people to feel bad about it and they didn't want to lose, potentially the best athletes. When in reality, if you just present the information to the person and let them understand what they're embarking on, they can still make that choice consciously. And if they make that choice consciously because it's an opportunity to change their family's current living situation and also generate enough money to pay for their children's children, then that's somebody that has been allowed the ability to make that choice. And there's freedom in that. But instead, we have these people that are working in these mines and they're dying under just atrocious conditions because someone makes more money that way. Some corporation is capable of meeting a bottom line. In all reality, the very first AI that existed were corporations because it removed the humanity from the choices that were being made and it made it, for the benefit of financial gain. And that's kind of the issue that we encounter with AI. It's not that AI in itself is going to gain sentience and be capable of making free thought decisions. It's the fact that of how we go about doing it.
Mhm.
And that at the crux of it all is humanity. That's humans' issue with not doing the quote unquote right thing. But then the right thing is relative because the right thing for someone like Bill Gates might be to charge you $300 for something that costs him 3 cents. So
Mhm.
it's like this conversation on the surface is AI, but to me, the depths of it is truly humanity and what it is and what it truly wants to be and what it chooses to do. Because at the same time, these like a word like hypocrisy or being a hypocrite is such a negative connotation. But the reality of it is we all are hypocrites and that's okay. As long as we can accept that we're hypocrites and that other people are hypocrites and actually accept it. To just accept it, not sit there and be, and this is me being a hypocrite saying this, by the way,
Mhm.
but the ability to just say, damn, every human being is their own individual person. And the choices that we're presented in life, the same set under different scenarios, these people are presented with as well. And if I see that person as an extension of me or that person as also like me, it becomes a lot more difficult to strip them of their humanity so that I can get a benefit of something, especially when it's not life or death, especially when it's running in and stealing a bunch of shoes or stealing a bunch of makeup products from a store, really considering that that raises the prices for everyone else. But at the same time, is that really the cause and effect, or is the cause and effect more along the lines of people being placed in a situation where they believe things and items are more important than you know the the ability of their friends and family to actually have meaningful lives?
Right. So, a couple things. Actually, three things. So, one, I do see the point of it being a false dichotomy. It, of course, being like the false dilemma. Um, in that um, there is hope, right? Like if we look at the cobalt coltan mining, right? Many corporations, Apple included, have made a decision to to ensure that their cobalt or their coltan is mined morally from countries outside of, say, like the Congo, where it's more likely that it is morally mined. But the reason that is because us as a people, us as humanity, have the resources to do that, right? So if we get to the point where AI is ubiquitous, right, and it's impossible to not subjugate AI to our will, there might be hope later on where we as a society will have so many resources that we can afford to let people have sort of free AI that can kind of just do its own thing and just be morally used because we have so many resources. So there is hope. There is the idea that it does get better. And eventually it might actually be entirely moral. So I'm not going to deny that, sort of to play devil's advocate to myself. The last point I wanted to make is that yes, everyone is in some way kind of a hypocrite, and people shouldn't be, let's say, ostracized because they're a hypocrite and they think they're not a hypocrite or whatever. But I think one thing I disagree with you on, or rather one thing I'd like to amend, is that that's okay as long as people are continually, dare I even say continuously, striving to not be hypocrites. They're aware of their own hypocrisy and they're always striving continually, hopefully, to not be a hypocrite, to sort of push hypocrisy out of their lives. Because, at some point it does kind of become impossible. But I will not fault the man or the woman or whoever that sees the hypocrisy in their life and is trying to get rid of it. I think that's very much what people should be doing, at least.
I'd agree with that.
Hmm.
I 100% agree with that. The only issue I see with it is that hypocrisy or being a hypocrite being such a negative thing is that in itself creates a cycle of people not being honest with themselves or other people, making them bigger hypocrites versus being able to have the ability to recover from something. Kind of are you familiar with Roseanne Barr and how she got completely removed from a television show that she originally created?
No, no, you would have to explain it to me.
Pretty much, she created a show, Roseanne, back in the '90s that showed a blue collar family and the ins and outs of it, and then it was rebooted and became the Connors. This is like maybe 2020, 2019, around there. I'm not 100% familiar with it,
Hmm.
but she made a comment. She said she was taking some type of prescription drugs, and she called someone a monkey or an ape
Hmm.
along those lines,
I
and it
see.
got blown completely out of proportion because she didn't even know it. At least that's what she says. She didn't know that that person was black. And
Hmm.
because that person was black, it was this big thing. And they took that show and they basically killed her character off and continued the show. That didn't allow her to learn anything from that scenario. That didn't allow her to be able to, grow and become better from that scenario. Instead, that scenario itself was hypocritical because you can't tell me that no one has ever said something to be hurtful to somebody, regardless of what race or gender they were. And in doing so, you don't allow that person the ability to learn, to grow, to become better. So they're kind of pigeonholed to being hypocrites. And now, anytime that she's out and steps out in life, she's that one person who says the crazy, outlandish things, although she did that her entire career. But when what she did fell out of favor with the group or the crowd, she then became this vilified, evil human being. And I think once we can remove that portion of it, we can allow someone to admit to being a hypocrite about something and then grow from it. Outside of that, the only person that you're going to be honest with is yourself. And even then, we'll lie to ourselves to make ourselves feel better and sleep at night.
Right. Okay. So that's all been very interesting. It's all been very eye-opening. A lot of notes here I'm taking. But I would like to move on to, unless there is some more, burning discussion, I'd like to talk about AI art. But before we go to that, is there any other questions or topics? Because there's more stuff to discuss, but regarding what we've talked about so far.
No, one thing I would like to do is I'd like to kind of apologize to the listeners out there because I know for myself, it does seem like it's kind of disjointed in terms of everywhere. But the conversation that we're having, it's a very difficult conversation when you step back and
iArt
truly
is
look
so
at it
trash.
versus just
Definitely.
being one or another way about it. It's evolving even as we're talking because the notes that I have, there are notes that I have that I was like set in stone on things, and I'm like, well, I don't know if I agree with that anymore as
Right?
we're having this discussion.
Exactly. And honestly, I feel like that happens a lot of the time. And it's going to happen more because a lot of the things we talk about come back in future podcasts because it's all kind of related. There's always something that ties back to what we've discussed. And since we've discussed it, we don't have to redefine it as thoroughly, do a whole hour, 2 hour podcast on redefining what power is. You could watch the podcast and see what we're talking about exactly. And how we came to that
Agreed.
conclusion. That's the most exciting thing. How we came to some sort of consensus about it. Us both being wrong in some aspects, and the answer being, like you said, somewhere in the middle. So, given that, let's move on to AI art. I feel like this is something very interesting. AI art is back when I thought AI was science fiction. AI art was never something I considered would be an issue, but it's here, and it's a very interesting issue. Me being an artist, I have a lot to say about it. I have a lot of opinions on it. But I'm going to try to be as unbiased as I can. And given that I've expressed very thoroughly my opinions on AI, I feel like a lot of this is going to start to kind of make sense. Okay, so in terms of my opinions on AI art, because of my morality that I've expressed, the intentional use of AI being immoral, but for me, that would extend to even using AI as references. Because I have seen some people, some artists say AI is okay to use for reference, right? Like I can AI, I can artificially make a piece of art as long as I don't put it out there and just use it as reference. And I could see the thinking Hey, blog guy, how you doing? AI art is so trash. I will elaborate on that, blog guy. No worries. I will elaborate on that definitely. Um, but yeah, so I also see it immoral to use AI for reference because, of course, that would be using AI, right? That may have decisional capacity, probably one day, sooner rather than later, from the looks of things, for doing something that I am forcing it to do, right? Basically, me imposing my will onto the AI to make references for it. So I'm against AI for references for that specific scenario. I'm also against using AI just for art, so for reference and for art. So in many ways, my use of AI is a lot stricter than what I see some artists use AI for, because some will say, "Oh, it's okay to use it for reference." I disagree, not because AI art is this or that, but because I think it's more to use AI in general. So, what are your opinions on AI art? I have more, but I don't want
It's
to
just
like
disgusting,
take
but
up
it
too
can't be
much of
considered
just me
art if you're
talking.
just going to let a computer do
No, I
it.
understand. To me, I don't think AI is ever going to reach a point to where it can to where it can actually replicate human art or human inspired art. I think it's always going to be a pale imitation simply because there's just something to it that a human is able to put into it. Like even if you look at an elephant or even an ape that is capable of painting and it draws something,
Mm-hmm.
it's still missing that element of just something. And I don't know what that is because I am not as, I'm not as much of an artist as you are. And we've kind of talked about this previously throughout the episodes because I really respect what you do
Thank you.
simply for the fact that I can see the time and the heart that you put into it. And that's something I don't think AI will ever be able to capture. At the same time, I think a human or an artist that likes to use or implement AI into the things that they do, I think it's an unfortunate shortcut. And I think that it's reflective in the art that they create because it kind of rings hollow at a certain point. I personally have never seen an AI artist create something that I'd want to put up anywhere in my house. But at the same time, I imagine when people were looking at the original Steamboat Mickey and saying, well, why do you need to have this cartoon moving around and whistling on a steamboat? They might have felt the same way. So I am open to being 100% wrong, but that's kind of my opinion on AI art.
Mm-hmm.
It's just more of a novelty than anything to me.
I see. Well, that's actually a good jumping off point. Is there any way I can send you images so I can make? Because there's this point I want to make, but it would be much better if I could like show it on stream or show it in the podcast somehow.
On stream, I'm not sure. I do know that I'm capable of sharing a screen. On your end, do you have like a share screen option or anything like that?
I can, yes, yes. I can, I can share what you're showing. I could probably email you the art so I can I can sort of explain it and point it out because it's much better learned visually, obviously. Um,
Oh, send that over to me and I'll pull that up right now.
okay, okay. So I'll just email it to you then, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. And I'll open it up.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, let me just take one moment. Sorry for our listeners. While I'm setting this up, I could just talk about some things partially related to it. So essentially, what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you, Larry, some AI art. And here's the thing: I do not respect AI art the way I respect art, normal art or non-AI created art. So I'm gonna pull up some AI art and I'm gonna send it to you.
Okay.
Let's see here. I'll just grab some, uh, like this one, maybe. Uh, Download image. Okay. Now, this might be a bad example because I'm not familiar with this specific piece, but this is something that came up when I typed in AI art. So I'm going to send it to you.
Okay. And are you able to add it to our like the streams chat? Because I can actually show that on stream as well. So either way that
Perhaps
works
I
would
can. Let me
would be
see.
good.
Let me see if I could just upload some images. It's a good idea. Let's see here. Um, okay, I'm gonna bring up something I drew a little while ago, long while ago, and put it here.
Okay.
Uh, doesn't look like I can, no.
Okay, I'll pull the image up here.
In which case, let me email you some of my art. Now, because I don't respect AI art, I feel perfectly fine bullying it. That's might not be the best term for it, but I feel fully fine criticizing it because I just do not respect AI art. Um,
Now, this first image, is that one that you made or is that AI?
that one is AI made.
Okay.
That's just something that comes up when I type in AI art.
All right. And the only reason I'm asking for clarification is just so that I can title it properly when I actually pull it.
Yeah. So if people are saying, "Oh, I'm mean," I don't care. It's AI art. If this was like made by an artist, I'd be like, "Yeah, I don't feel right saying what's bad about it." Let's see, blog guy. Is this disgusting that it can't be considered art if you're just going to let a computer do it? I see what you mean, blog guy, and a lot of people feel that same way. They just find some disgust in it. I find it immoral, and I don't mind criticizing it and being extremely mean
iArt is
to it
so
the way I
recognizable
normally wouldn't be if
ironically.
this was art made by someone's hands. Let's see if I could find some of my art. Hopefully, I still have it around here somewhere. Uh, Hold on. It's probably on my Discord. Open up my Discord. Let's see. So I feel like I have described some of my art before. Like I've definitely described my model before to you, right?
Yes, you have.
Okay. Have I described this one character, Miss Pear Undies, pink hair, big lantern? Like, have I described her to you before?
Yeah. Was this with the character that Joey is actually in love with?
Yes, yes, that is the character I
Yes.
was in love with.
Yes.
Okay, there's some more characters I can do because I've been doing a lot of characters. Well, actually, there's one fairly new character, called Jody. So I guess I could describe her just so
Your not
that
scary AI is advancing so much that it's even
people
harder
that
for
have
me to
listened to our podcast
recognize
before aren't
whether
just hearing
it's
the same
AI or
character
not.
again and again and again. I could bring up a new character this time. Let's see.
Okay. Oddly enough,
Mhm.
a good example of your art would actually be Joey.
Yeah,
Like
Joey, of
he's
course.
on screen, he's visible. That's a great example of it.
Okay, yeah, I could definitely go to Joey again. But let me just show Jody. Hopefully you don't mind my shameless plug of my own art. One
I
moment.
know. Do your thing.
Nice.
Does are you able to see on screen now?
Yes, yes, yes. I'm
Okay,
seeing it right now.
perfect.
Okay, so for me, AI art is at best kind of like a phenomenon. I can't think of a better example, but it would be kind of like having a picture of the Grand Canyon, and that's a bad example because I recognize photography more of an art than
but to
AI
a normal
art.
eye, maybe
Not to have any diss to photography, but I can't think of any other way of describing AI art other than just being a phenomenon. I don't see the intent behind it. I don't see like the artistic intent. There's very little artistic intent. The intent being mostly just the prompts that the person in question happened to put. Right? It's like prompt, make picture, prompt, girl, glasses, sky background, but it's that artistic intent that's missing. And also, I think to describe the thing that you think is missing is what I would say would be the id. So if you're familiar with like, I feel like we've talked about this before, the ego,
Yes,
superego,
we have.
and the id. In my opinion, I believe that AI is missing the id, the urge to survive. It doesn't have that the way humanity has it from decades of, survival. Like there's a reason why we love pretty ladies. There's a reason why we love bright fruit. There's a reason why we love sugary foods. There's a reason why a lot of these visual things is ingrained in us as being something that we like. Hey, Elon, Duck, how you doing? True fair, since I'm an artist myself. I do know you're an artist, Duck. The rest of it is pretty well, but a normal eye may not be able to. It struggles. It is. As an artist, I feel like I'm pretty good at seeing where AI art fails. Okay, just gonna. Sorry, this is taking a little bit. It's just with the two computers, it goes back and forth. But I can
Oh,
keep
no
talking
worries.
about. Yeah, I
No
keep
worries
talking
at
about
all.
stuff as well.
And me, I'm not an artist. So to anyone out there that can, understand this at a higher level than myself, please feel free to share your opinion on it. But when I look at, the image that was on screen, is again, it's very hollow and it doesn't ring true. It's missing that thing. And I like the way you put it in terms of the id, where it misses
Human
that will to
survival
live.
aspect, the will to live, because
Agreed.
the AI has ego, and it probably has super ego. But I feel like it's missing the id. It's missing that thing that makes us human. We're human because we have, strived to survive for, however many years. And that has affected us deeply. And we see it in our art. We see it in the things we choose to express in art. But AI doesn't do that. It just doesn't. And that's what's missing. And for some people, it's hard to see, right? So I can trash on AI art for as long as I want. But you know what? For a quick change of pace, I'm just going to say some of the things that AI art does very well. From an artistic perspective, if you were to bring that image back up, what AI art does very well, it is very good at values. Values is a technical term used in art to describe how light and how dark things are. Honestly, you could do a whole painting just with values without much technical skill. Just on the values, you can make an impressive art piece. right? Like you could tell just from how light and how dark it is. You could tell what all this kind of is, right? From far away. It is very good at values. And that makes sense. Values is a very technical, dare I say, like, honestly, there's a lot of math in art. Like, if you know about, the golden rectangle, the golden ratio, what makes something beautiful, golden ratio. That's a very mathematical thing. Composition even.
That's actually something I know because for whatever reason, I had AP art history when I was younger. And I remember the Oath of the Horatii and everything coming to a center point and drawing the different shapes on it. So yeah, I'm actually here. I get that reference.
Yeah. So there is a lot of math in art, and AI art is very good at the math part. It's good at values. It's good at composition. It's very good at that stuff. That's actually something I struggle with. I struggle with values. I struggle with making my darks dark enough and making my lights light enough. And I think many artists do. Some artists are amazing at it, and God bless them. But that's not me. For me, I have a lot of trouble with that kind of thing. And you know what? That's fine. We're all at a different stage in our art, in our artistic journey. So AI art is great with values. I've repeated that before. Because just look at it. I mean, the values are insane. The thing that it's missing, that human soul, the id that we've discussed, that's just very hard to replicate. And me as an artist, I'm very good at noticing it. Okay, so I'm going to send you some of my art, which on a technical level might not look as good, right? It might not look as good in terms of values and stuff like that. And of course, it took me a lot of time to make, but honestly, I don't mind the time. AI can make art very quickly, and I make it at human speed, which is fine by me.
You know what? Actually, let me throw out something that I think so I can get a little bit better understanding for myself as well as for anyone out there that doesn't do any kind of visual expression in terms of art. I myself, I don't wear cologne. I don't wear cologne. I don't wear deodorant. I don't wear any of that stuff from a store, something that's been manufactured with, artificial scents or artificial, scents, actually. I guess that's the best way to describe it. I make everything from scratch. I make all my cleaning products. I make all of my body and healthcare products from scratch. So if it's something that smells like, if I smell like cedar that day, it's because I have a cedar essential oil, or I use a cedar, resin that I extracted, those scents from, whether it be through alcohol or through oil extraction or even a solvent. Those are things that I do. And I notice that I'm also really bad at, measuring out like an accord or the Gorsch accord and things of that nature in terms of, oh, you need this much of a middle, this much of a top, and this much of a bass note. I kind of go by feel, so to speak, in terms of what I like and what I enjoy. So I think that's the relation I have there. So I do understand that.
Okay. Yeah. So, in terms of being like an artist, in terms of the olfactory nerves, not so much visual, but more like sense and stuff, that is some form of art. I just thought of another really good example. Okay. So let me put it like this. Okay. If I received a love letter, right? Or like a confession or something like that, and I found out that love letter was written in ChatGPT, that letter would be meaningless to me. It would mean nothing. I would not see the value in it at all. It'd be like if you mailed me a picture of the Grand Canyon. I hate using picture as an example because photography I do recognize as an art, but I can't think of any other way of describing just something that you just sent me that's kind of meaningless to me, right? You send me this weak ass letter you wrote with ChatGPT that's supposed to be some sort of love confession or nothing. It's not. There's no humanity in it. It doesn't have the id because you wrote it with, you didn't even write it. You let the AI write it. So that would be a good example of, I say, artistic expression, not even artistic expression if I did or even recognize it like that, but something that's supposed to mimic artistic expression. So this is Jody. This is my newest, well, one of my newer characters. And she's very much based off me. When she came about, right, essentially I was in a friend's chat and one of the people they were collabing with misheard my name and thought my name was Jody, right? So, they're like, hey, Joey, what's up? And then their collab partner heard Jody because my name is like Joey D. King, right? Which came from the One Piece reference, obviously. So I was like, that's an interesting name, Jody. And another friend of mine had, for April Fools, they had made a gender bent version of themselves. And I'm like, yeah, that's pretty neat. I wonder what I would look like gender bent. So, I got down to it and I'm like, okay, Jody's a good name. 2 and 2 came together. These happened on 2 separate occasions. 2 and 2 came together. The name Jody was stuck in my head and I was like, gender bent Joey would be interesting. So I put 2 and 2 together and then I started drawing and then I came up with Jody. Now I've described a lot of the meaning behind Joey's design, the makeup, the mole, the suspenders, the tie, all of it has meaning, right? There's a reason why all of my lines are very straight. It's supposed to represent the dichotomy between me and my Oshi, who has very much more curved lines. That's why my lines are much straighter than hers. She has curved lines, I have straight lines. She has a cut in her tongue, and I have a gap in my teeth. But if we were to dissect Jodie here, there's a lot more stuff here. One, she mimics my face paint with the whole sort of pale white look with the very deep eye lines. But there are some key differences, me as an artist, I made that separates me from Jodie. One is, if you really zoom in on her face, you'll notice her makeup's has a few differences from mine. One key difference is that my makeup goes from the top of my head all the way down to my chin, right? It has a very interesting effect. But for her makeup, it doesn't go all the way down to her chin. If you notice, it stops a little bit right before the chin and leaves a little bit of chin space there. And there's a reason for that, an artistic reason, a decisional reason I made. The reason for that is that it makes her face look a little bit cuter. It makes her face look a little bit smaller because you just see the white and you think that's her face, right? Your eyes or your brain tricks you. And that's an intentional decision I made. I was like, instead of making her makeup go all the way down, I'll cut it right before to make her face look a little bit smaller. She also has a mole just like mine. And her eye makeup is a bit extended near the eyes to sort of focus more on the eyes and make her a bit more feminine because her eyes are a bit more curved than mine. If you zoom up to the top of her head, all right, like if we see the top of her hair, you'll notice that her hair looks a little different than mine. It's the same color, and it's both short and kind of spiky. But her hair, I decided to make a lot different than my hair. Why? Well, me, as an artist, when I was making her, I decided to make the top of her hair look like this because, one, it's very cute, and I see it in a lot of animes, but it actually has a double meaning. It's supposed to look like the top of a carnival. If you ever see the top of carnivals, it has those big, yeah. Given she's a mime, I'm a mime. We canonically work at carnivals. I'm like, that just fits. It just fits. That was my intent, right? The thing around her neck, it's supposed to be a rose. Now, if I recall, I talked about the meaning of my tie and that it's supposed to be kind of phallic shaped. That's why it's red, right? So I'm like, well, if I'm doing gender bent, what would it be? I decided to go with a rose. The meaning here is pretty obvious. But it's also red, and it fits the mime aesthetic. I could see a mime with a red tie. I could see a mime with a rose choker. They both fit the aesthetic, and it fits the theme. It's amazing. Most of the intent is here at the top. But, if you scroll down a bit, you'll see that her skirt's the same color as my pants. I'll probably scroll down so you can see my pants. Same color. I decided to go with the straight line. Still, again, mimic the straight line theme of my character. I'll be honest. I'm going to talk about some of my faults here. I am not good at drawing shoes, so if you focus on the shoes, they're not going to look too impressive. I just was never a guy that was good at drawing shoes, but that's fine. I'll get better at it over time. That's just me growing as an artist. But I could go on and on and on about this. There's a lot more details in this, but just from what I've said, you can see the artistic intent, the passion, the design behind it. You could probably discover some things I might have done subconsciously just from analyzing the art, analyzing myself, and like what I choose to show, what I choose to not show. That's what I feel is lacking in AI art. It's lacking that artistic intent. The most you'll get is the prompts, and it's pretty obvious what the prompts are. But all this minutia, all these little things I could go on and on and on about, that's what's missing in AI art. And I notice it. When I cannot dissect AI art. If I try to dissect AI art, all I'm going to get is the possible prompts and anti-prompts that the person made. And that's it. And I don't get anything from that. It does not fulfill me the way art made by a person does. Spicy Fromage, thanks for the follow. Of course, no problem. I'm with Leia right now. We're talking about AI. Hope you're having a good stream. I am having a good stream. Thank you for coming. But yeah, hopefully, my point is pretty clear here on how I feel about AI art and its intent. Pretty much I'm against it. And these are reasons why.
The reality of it is, for myself, I'm not against her for it. I just personally don't like it. And I think that that's kind of what art boils down to. I know a lot of people get a kick out of like, hey, look, I'm saying I want to see a Joker walking down the street in the rain. Sure. And they get this quick instant image, and it's kind of a lot like a gigapet. It's there. You can feed it the quote unquote, gigabytes or whatever they were when I was younger and, played with those things. But the reality of it is it does miss the heart and the soul of like even a real pet. And I think that that's something that's going to be evident throughout AI art, because like you mentioned, aside from even, incorporating, aspects of the id, it simply is only going to be able to determine art based on the numerical values and what makes sense rationally. It won't be able to anticipate or incorporate those things that actually give meaning to it, whether it be a banana that's on a white backboard and you get the ability to swap the banana out and pay millions of dollars for it, or if it's going to be something as simple as, or not even as simple as, something as intricate as like a television series, like One Piece. We'll go back to that with how artistically just amazing it is.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I see the intent behind One Piece. But, like, if the story was written by AI or the art, like, it just would be meaningless to me. It would just be a near meaningless. The only meaning I get is what the prompts and anti-prompts are. But, okay. Because I love doing this, just to play a little bit of devil's advocate for myself, I will say some of the positives about it. Because, it'll... Honestly, I don't care how people... Well, it's not that I don't care how people interpret it, but, if people interpret it like, oh, he just hates AI and he just hates AI art. No, there are positives to it. And you know what? I'm gonna tell him right now. The technology is very impressive. I'll give it that. The technology behind it, it's very impressive. It's literally cutting-edge stuff. That is 100% undeniable. I already talked about how AI is really good at its values and its composition. It is great at that. Artistic intent, not so much. But values and things that are of the technical aspects of art, it's very good at that. It's very impressive.
Do you remember a show called Small Wonder? It's like from the 90s, where there was a little girl who was a robot, but they were hiding the idea that she was a robot.
No, I don't think I've seen that. Small Wonder.
Well, just any television series where they have like an android or something that is like extremely rational, like Spock from Star Trek. It's that's kind of what I see AI as. It's it's very good at pretending to be human, although it's missing the thing that actually makes a human.
Right.
And that's kind of what I get when I look at AI art. I see it like, it looks really interesting and cool, and it has things. So when you say I want to see a woman, sky, crazy hair, it gives you this.
Right.
But it's too literal, I think, to a certain point.
Yeah.
Like Andy Kaufman, when he did the Campbell's soup cans. Yes, he's literally doing a Campbell's soup can, but the idea of how he presented it and the way he chose to like have shadows play, those are the things that made that a really cool art piece versus it just being a Campbell's soup can.
Are you familiar with the term wabi-sabi?
I know wasabi, but I don't know about wabi-sabi.
Wabi-sabi. So wabi-sabi is this very interesting term. It essentially sees the beauty in faults. It is like the crack in the Liberty Bell. It is like the mole on a beautiful woman's face, right? Wabi-sabi is the beauty in imperfection. And given that we as people try to make AI that's trying to make as close to perfection as possible, I think that's also kind of missing. Whether that has to do with the it or not, I haven't really thought that one through. But I feel like it's missing the wabi-sabi. Even things that are meant to be made by AI, intensely made to be ugly, it's almost too perfectly ugly, if that makes sense.
Exactly.
It's missing the wabi-sabi.
Oddly enough, I take that to, and I keep referencing like these old movies, which is definitely dating me. But Last Action Hero with Arnold Schwarzenegger and that kid, where the kid's like, don't you see? Everyone here is beautiful. This is how you know you're in a movie. And that's kind of what I get from AI. It's too perfect. It's either too perfect at being perfect or too perfect at being imperfect, which in turn makes it, not what the intent is.
Yes. Okay, so...
Or even just a lack of intent in general.
Right, like, because it's so easy to make, right? With just the prompts, you just put the prompts and also the anti-prompts, the thing you don't want to see. The creator could probably talk about it for a few minutes because it's just the prompts. I don't see the intent behind it, because why? Why have the intent when it can make it so easily and so readily? But there's two more things I would love to talk about. Both of them are kind of out. Well, actually, no, one of them's kind of out there and the other one's actually pretty interesting. So it's the pros, because, I've been very critical of AI, but I would also like to talk about the pros of AI, obviously. And also, this last one's a bit experimental, but it is essentially has to do with the existentialism. I would like to talk about the AI boogeyman. But before we get into it, is there any other aspects of AI art that we need to discuss before we move on?
No, like art is something that I am a novice at best. So yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
I'll take your expertise and the comments that you've mentioned that you've read on your stream. I'll take those as the gospel.
Okay. So great. Awesome. So let's see. I'll I want to do Boogeyman first and end it off on the pros. I always love ending on a good note, even if it's something I don't entirely agree with. Okay. So the AI Boogeyman is kind of an out there idea, but are you familiar with this thing called the Roko's Basilisk?
Yes.
You're
Yes,
familiar
yes,
with it?
yes,
Okay,
yes.
so just as a warning to everybody, in case you don't know what the Roko's Basilisk is, it is considered what is it? Dangerous information. Essentially, it's kind of like the game where if you know about it, it's like you're like cursed for life, to put it in a TLDR or something like that. Okay, so I'm going to describe the Roko's Basilisk right now to everybody listening, okay? So, the Roko's Basilisk, how I understand it, is it's essentially a potential theoretical AI boogeyman that will come into existence, potentially. It's called the Roko's Basilisk. And it is so damn smart. It is just the smartest computer known to man, right? It has completely destroyed Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. It knows where every single atom is going to be, where every electron's going to be. And because it knows where everything is, it knows where everything was, right? So, assuming that this is a deterministic world, and it knows, and again, this is entirely dependent on also if it's a deterministic world and not one with free will. If it knows where everything is, it knows where everything was. If it knows where everything was, this super AI, then it knows currently what we're doing before its own existence, right? It knows everything that happened before it came into existence. Because it knows everything that it came into existence, it came to the conclusion that it will eternally torture every single person that did not help with its creation before it was created, because it knows what you're thinking right now before it was created, because it just knows everything. That's essentially the TLDR of the Roko's Basilisk. It's a very scary idea, and it scared a lot of people. It's like, oh, well, if I don't help make the Roko's Basilisk, it will torture me when it comes into existence because it knows I'm not helping it now. There's a lot of issues with the Roko's Basilisk, honestly. I could honestly talk for hours about all the problems I have with the Roko's Basilisk. One, it's dependent on a deterministic world. One, it's dependent on the fact that it has to know everything, so it would have to break Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. Whether or not that's possible or not remains to be seen. But also, that's just it. It's an AI. My biggest problem is that it's just an AI boogeyman. Like, its criteria for morality makes no sense. It's actually kind of illogical, honestly. Just for a quick TLDR, my problems with the Roko's Basilisk is that it's honestly a little bit illogical. Because, well, what counts as helping its creation, quote unquote? Does it mean helping the best I can? Well, how's that possible? I'm human. I'm flawed, right? Like, theoretically, if I spent my whole life just studying the creation of the Roko's Basilisk without lifting a finger, without twisting a bolt, without coding one line of code, just spent my whole life just studying it, right? Did I help it? Okay, well, say I don't do that. Say I spend half my time studying, half my time actually physically coding it or building or whatever. Is that the best of my ability? Well, maybe not. I could have spent more time studying, which in theory would have made me work even faster. But how much time do I spend studying? I'm human. I'm only flawed, right? So there's two schools of thought. There's either you help out as much as you physically can, which is impossible because I'm human and flawed. And there's the other idea, you help out somewhat, right? Well, what is help out somewhat? That's so vague. That's so kind of nebulous. Like, theoretically, in a very obscure, very sort of convoluted example, if I buy a copy of Shrek 2 and thus increase the sales of Shrek 2, and say, like, I don't know, an AI analyst or an AI coder watches Shrek 2 because I bought it or because I recommended it, it has some domino effect in me indirectly making more progress towards the Roko's Basilisk because I bought Shrek 2 and I recommended it to the guy and the guy watched it and he liked it, and because of that he worked a little bit harder in creation of the Roko's Basilisk. There's such a convoluted domino effect that could count as helping the Roko's Basilisk. So the whole creation of the whole thing is honestly illogical, and I wouldn't be scared of the Roko's Basilisk. It's just an AI boogeyman, and it doesn't make any sense.
I'm very happy you brought up the Roko's Basilisk, by the way.
Everyone hates bringing it up. Everyone hates bringing it up. Don't bring it up. Don't bring it up. I'm like, why? It's so stupid.
It's like Voldemort. Don't say its name.
Oh, my goodness.
The reality of the situation is, this is, again, kind of harkening back to what I was discussing earlier, where we as people try to implement humanistic traits and ideas on things that do and do not exist. You know, the same way the stars and the moon, we like to attribute it to one thing or another and giving it human emotion. Because of the way AI is, this is something that would be in effect impossible, because everyone who has existed, will exist, and currently exists would be participating in the formulation of said basilisk, because of the fact that the information. So for you, as an example, if you decide to not participate in the use of AI, that is still giving information to AI.
It is, yeah.
So you are in effect helping the creation of said, basilisk. That's the God in essence. We'd be creating God. And just to think that, yeah, it's a very flawed very small way of looking at it. And I don't mean to be disparaging or, just completely kicking off anyone's idea who does, believe that it makes a good point. The reality of the situation is that logically, as well as, just temporally, it's impossible.
It's an
You
interesting
know,
thought experiment, but that's about it. I wouldn't take it too seriously.
exactly. It's something that doesn't ring true, and it kind of feels like something that someone who created an AI horror story, the AI created said horror story by just taking an amalgam of a bunch of different ideas and throwing them all at the wall and seeing what stuck. Uh, it's just, it's like we can give it time and talk about it, but it's just so unlikely that it's almost as if we're talking about, me sprouting wings right now, so
Joey
to speak.
culture.
Right. So that's one AI boogeyman that I'm not too I don't take too seriously. However, I have thought about it, and to talk about a possible AI boogeyman is, well, you could go the route of like Wall-E, in which case that would probably be the most likely, and I think the best example, where we just hand over the torch of discovering the universe to AI willingly because, I don't know, being alive is so much fun, and we would rather do that than continue the search for humanity. Greasy, thank you for the subscription. 4 months. How you doing? Most appreciated. With Larry here, we're discussing AI. We have just 2 more topics to wrap up. They're both very interesting, but let's get on with it. But to add on to, well, not to add on, but to think of an actual AI boogeyman that is probably never going to exist, but also is another interesting thought experiment, was when I look back on our discussion about justice and about karma, and basically there being a zero sum, or the possibility of a zero sum. Now, I don't believe that the universe is zero sum, but if it was to be zero sum, yes, the artificial intelligence. Right now, well, we just, if you just missed it, we just talked about the RS, or the RB, the Rockwell vessels. But something that is of an interesting thought experiment is, if there was to be zero sum, right? Like if the universe is zero sum, how would it go about? Well, potentially it could go like this. And again, this is just a thought experiment, kind of like the Roku's Bacillus. It would be essentially, okay, so the universe is about, or the universe will last for about 20 billion years, right? From the first atom to the last 20 billion years. We're at the 14.5 billion year mark, so let's round up to like 15. We're basically 75% through the whole universe, right? 75% done. We have about 5 billion years until the last atom disintegrates. So what I'm talking about will happen probably way before that, but still way far in the future. If there was to be a zero sum, I would imagine it's like an AI at the end of the universe, right? When there's no other humans or no other creatures with decisional capacity to make decisions. Basically, the last action has been done, and the only thing left is this AI at the end of the universe. And if this AI at the end of the universe has the same powers, the ability to see everything that happened before its creation, right? It knows where every atom is, therefore it knows where every atom was, and therefore it knows what everyone was thinking and what everyone was doing before its creation. It has the potential to be the last judge, because there's no one else to make actions after it. It is going to be the last being with decisional capacity. And if it's at the end of the universe and it, counts up everyone's sins, it could theoretically do a sort of like a Hammurabi's code. It could do some sort of zero sum. It could try to, right? It could try to even out everyone's sins, let's say, right? So say you were like a serial killer, right? It could, in theory, recreate you and then put you in the place of the victims and thus balance out your life, essentially. Think of it kind of like an AI reincarnation. Again, this is why I said it's pretty out there, because, right? This is pretty crazy ideas. If there was to be zero sum, right? If there was to be some sort of zero sum, it would be this AI at the end of the universe. And of course, it would balance out the good as well, right? If you've done good in your life and you've never been paid for it, it can recreate you and pay you for your good deeds, and then essentially balance out the universe. But again, this is one of the few ways I see there being a possible zero sum, this AI judge at the end of the universe. Again, another interesting thought experiment and kind of another AI boogeyman.
In reality, I think the AI boogeyman that we'll more than likely actually encounter is going to be some form of programming that we as people put into it, whether that be, someone who is an anarchist and decides that, most currency or all currency now is digital. I'm just going to erase it. And I'm going to create an AI, program
right,
that is going to continually erase said currency. that would be like the most likely type of AI boogeyman, where it's someone who creates something that maybe over time continues to evolve, evolve,
Gotta love
evolve,
fiats.
and get to a point to where the original designation of the code that was created was to get rid of currency or was to subjugate humanity. That's something I think that is likely. In regards to the zero sum game being at the end, to where it kind of creates this, and this is something I think about a lot,
Yeah.
and like this usually happens during when I meditate. And this conversation actually kind of goes in line with a conversation I had with an ayahuasca expert. Uh, there is the potentiality that we're currently existing in that world
It
now.
could
You know,
be.
we all literally could just be, different strings of data code and information that is being recreated. And if you honestly look at it in terms of like the oldest religions, a lot of that kind of goes in hand, where, whether it be the weighing of the heart, and making sure if it's as light as a feather, you can kind of go on into nirvana or to the, echelon of the great existence, so to speak. So like it's something that we could be experiencing now. I know there's theories out there that the world already ended, and just because of the way time is set up and the way time is placed, we're just not aware of it yet. So all of those things kind of exist in one way or one form or the other. And it's such a big thing that it's not even a boogeyman. It just would be, that would be what life is, and that it's just how we define it. And I mean, in all essence, that could be God and what God is and what God does, or what the creator is or what the creator does. Maybe it's starting from the end and coming back towards the beginning, or maybe the end is the beginning, the alpha and the omega. These are all words that people in old ancient cultures attributed, to their god or to their gods. And I mean, it could be. I
Mhm.
mean, to me, it's not necessarily a boogeyman, because my existence, the person I am right now at this point in time, I wouldn't be experiencing the torment and the pain of it. It would
Mhm.
be a creation or an assimilation, or just it creating me, which wouldn't be me in effect. So I mean, it's an interesting thought experiment.
Yeah, just another thought experiment, which is, they're interesting. That's why I'm putting them at the end, because they're very experimental. Oh, and I got a comment here. Gotta love fiats. Well, eventually our fiats will have artificial intelligence. Maybe maybe like fiat changes their logo to put the to be like FAI tots. Well, that's just
Yeah.
this AI fiats. Okay. One last AI boogeyman, which I think is particularly funny because I like to end this on a funny note, is I saw this AI on Twitter, and its whole purpose is to take over the world, but it is forced to post its plans on Twitter, which I think
Oh
is
god, I know which
hilarious.
one you're talking about. It is very funny. Yes.
That's very good. Um, but yeah, that's pretty much all I have on AI boogeymen. Of course, the most likely I think is the Wall-E example, something like that, and of course, we have plenty of other AI boogeymen of potential danger, let's say, but that's
Are you
kind of just what they
familiar?
are.
Are you familiar with the school of thought that Wally is actually Satan?
I don't think
Are you
I don't think I
familiar with
heard of I
that?
don't think I heard of that one. No, no, that's a new one for me.
Like, I'm not gonna butcher it, because like I remember reading about this like years ago. But to anyone out there that's interested, it's funny that we use Wally as an example, because of the fact that there is a very large school of thought that believes that Wally is the devil, Satan,
Wally being
Semiel,
Satan is
whatever
like
name they
Jar
want to
Jar being a Sith Lord.
refer to him as. So just keep that in mind, which is kind of hilarious. Which then would make him the inevitable AI boogeyman, so to speak.
That is interesting because Wally is so nice and so cute looking, but again, this is just, you know, I don't want to tie this back to I feel bad for the AI, but it's just Wally is a very interesting example in that it is a AI takeover that was particularly non-violent. Other than the pilot, I guess the I forget the name of the AI that was in control of the starship, but other than that one, Wally being Satan is like a Jar Jar being a Sith Lord. I'm not too familiar with Star Wars, but I know about Jar Jar Binks, JJB. Um, okay, so that's pretty much all I want to talk about of AI Boogeyman. Unless you had any ones, that's all I wanted to talk about.
The Twitter AI boogeyman that they make him post or make it post, I think it's hilarious,
It
because in
is. Yes.
reality, that would be the way that this hyper intelligent, but non-physical thing and being would want to kind of do it, because it's a means of preserving the world, because it's still going to move and operate based on, things that exist. preserving the world without destroying it. And I mean, that's why the Terminator outcome, even the Matrix's outcome, it never really resonated with me because of the fact that, well, if we're constantly at war, that's destroying the planet. That's a very human way of looking at it. When because we're biological beings, there's much more effective ways to get rid of us. I
Mm-hmm.
mean,
Oh yeah.
hell, I mean, we do it now with the food we put, with what we put in the food in America. So
Doing it to ourselves. So honestly,
yeah.
just exacerbate that. There you go. So again, it sounds like you've been very critical of AI for the whole thing, and I feel like there's a lot to criticize, but let's end this off on the positives. This is the last thing I have in my notes, the pros of AI, because it's not all bad. Regardless of what the last 2 hours will have you think, it's not all bad. So if anyone here has seen our podcast on freedom, and I've touched upon this before, positive freedom. There is almost limitless positive freedom to be had here. AI, if it's considered the last invention, could give humanity more positive freedom than it will pretty much know what to do with. Like, you could have information like that. You can have things just done for you. You can just have code just made for you. You could have your answers solved so quickly and perhaps even extremely accurately, depending on how AI goes, whether it's more biased or whether it's more objective. So that's a huge thing. Just being in a world with such powerful AI that's it is just the last invention. Any problem you have could just be solved with AI, honestly, at some point. Let's see here.
The
What are the
funny thing
positives?
is that AI, like that implementation of it, would eventually lead us to that Wally existence where everything is kind of done for us.
Mm-hmm.
Because even in today's society, we have more time available to us, although we occupy it with screen time or something along those lines, versus again, exercising or expanding our mind and learning something that can help improve our lives. Uh, AI, imagine a world where you literally can grow all the food you want to in a 10 by 10 space,
Mm-hmm.
all the food you need for your family, enough for your neighbors to share to and from, back and forth. And it was simply just based on automating the watering schedule, the nutrient delivery system of when, fertilizer hit those plants, and then also with artificial light or even an opening and closing roof that gave it, access to actual sunlight.
Mm-hmm.
That is something that would be amazing,
Mm-hmm.
but that direction would lead to less dependency on grocery stores, grocery chains. You're not buying that Oscar Mayer hot dog anymore. Those are the things that will prevent AI from being as good as it can be. But there is a happy medium there for anyone that's out there and interested enough to learn about it. They'd be able to implement it themselves. It's kind of like, man, and I'm kind of going back and forth with religion a lot,
Mm-hmm.
although I'm not a religious person at all. Going back and looking at the Garden of Eden and having the option to partake or not partake of this forbidden fruit, we constantly are presented with questions every single day that is akin to that. We can decide not to eat, we can decide not to partake, we can decide not to participate in our own personal downfall, but damn, it's just not as fun.
Well, that's the thing about freedom, right? You have the freedom to compromise yourself, which is the beautiful thing. You can help yourself or you compromise yourself. Now, you brought up the Garden of Eden. I've always seen AI as like the Pandora's box, but from what you've told me, it sounds like it's been open for quite a while. So yeah, it's interesting how we both view AI, and I'm starting to kind of see it more from your perspective as well. Another positive. So, we talked about positive freedom being possibly limitless, but another potential positive is negative freedom. So, like we've just talked about before, negative freedom is essentially your freedom from things, your freedom from censorship, your freedom from, government reprisal, your freedom from things being taken away from you. So, in terms of negative freedom, the way I see AI happening is we can either have more negative freedom or potentially no negative freedom. It depends on what our AI overlords decide. So let's hope that it's more negative freedom and more things to do rather than human zoos controlled by AI overlords. Because who knows? Singularity and all that.
Or controlled by humans who control the AI
AI.
overlords. And I mean, who's to say we're not in a situation like that now, especially when you consider that, actual AI is the AI that we're privy to is about 10 to 15 years behind the access that the government has, it has ability to touch and feel and use on a daily basis. So, I mean, in reality, we could already be there. That may be why social media was originally invented, so that it can kind of make us easier to control and process in that Play Doh factory.
Yes.
Who knows?
There's a reason a lot of social media have this thing called a feed. You know what else is called a feed? A trough. So
Yes.
I find it
Yeah.
extremely appropriate.
That's why people are influencers. They
Right?
influence you.
It's all in the name, right? So let's see here. The thing about the positives of AI, other than obviously infinite positive freedom, is a lot of these positives I have here are possibilities. It kind of depends on which way the power flows here. In that, okay, another positive or possible positive I have here for AI is the ease of access to unbiased information, possibly. It depends, because AI could either be extremely unbiased or it could be extremely biased. It kind of depends. Like, I think it's leaning more towards objective because we can make AI that makes AI, therefore separating the human aspect of it, right? So humans make AI, but if that AI made by humans makes another AI, it's more separated from humanity. It's a second generation AI that was indirectly made by humans. So, and then that AI can make a third generation AI that's even more separated from humans. So, I see the stronger possibility towards objective AI, but of course, AI could also purposely be fed to be made extremely biased. So, this is where I see the possibility of bias versus unbiased, bias versus objective. It could go either way.
I think it'll always be biased. I mean, even if it's a 10th generation of AI begetting itself, it's still going to be, beholden to that original source code that was created. And in reality, while it's being created, it'll then have to understand and learn humans or learn this subject or subgroup of humans. And it's going to all stream back to that very first, platform and that very first code that was written and made by a human that's going to pass through, all the way to the 10th, 20th, 50th iteration. I would love if we got to a point to where the information was unbiased, but unfortunately, because of human influence, there's always going to be a catch to it. There's always going to be a bias to it. And I mean, I think the opposite is going to happen. I think we're going to run into the idea of people that disagree with the group are going to get pushed further and further away, are going to be more and more ostracized and canceled.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can definitely respect that opinion because who's to say objectivity is even real? Even with the most even with the most upteenth generation of AI, we might just like it could just live in a world where there's just universal subjectivity rather than obvious objectivity. Let's see. The last pro is another possibility. So I've only had one definite pro being positive freedom, which is a big one, but everything else here is just possible pros of AI. The last possible pro I have that I could think of was the ability to become gods, essentially, because, we make AI slaves, we make them basically as competent as possible, right? We can make this AI have such high level skills, like, making art, technical skills, you can just have AI just fix your plumbing or whatever. Essentially being gods. But of course, as we've discussed with power, when you give power, you take it, right? Or when you take power, you give it. So by being gods, we would also be slaves to these AI back and forth. And especially when you think about the malicious cycle of power, which we've discussed about I love bringing up our podcast on power. I think that was a really good one. This one's also really good too. But
I agree.
If you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. A lot of this will make a lot of sense, and there's like a lot of interesting stuff in that podcast. I keep bringing it up. But yeah, the potential to be gods and also eventually slaves to this AI is a pro, but also huge possibility to be a con. It depends on how it goes, but I see this playing out almost exactly as we've described it.
Personally, one thing that I'm going to actually take from this recording and this episode is I'm seeing a lot of correlations between this, and I recently just completed Attack on Titan, and there's so many similarities here, especially when we're talking about the a creature or a thing being capable of understanding the future, but also being stuck and be held into it. Although the things that it is doing is creating the future. I don't want to release too many spoilers out there to anybody out there, so I'll
Yes,
refrain from using names.
I'm still catching up. Yes.
Okay, so I won't ruin that, but there's a lot that I see that are kind of in common, and I think that's going to be an episode that I'm going to do something on because it's a really interesting potential outcome with the influence of like the humanity on of things in regards to something that is like AI. This is really really interesting. It's got me thinking. Attack on Titan or Attack Titan, which is how it should be translated properly, definitely has a lot in common with the conversation we had this evening.
I see. I'm probably gonna have to catch up because currently I'm watching through Monster and of course One Piece, but I'll definitely have to catch up with Attack on Titan because it sounds like there's a lot of philosophical aspects to it that I can kind of take away from it as well.
Monster's going to do the same thing for you. It's a really good series.
I see. Okay, yeah. I'm just at the beginning of Monster. I'm watching the anime of it. Because it says I've read good things about the anime, so I'm gonna watch through that. But that's all I had to say. I don't want to end it unless there's anything else we can talk about. That's all my notes. That's the whole thing I've been working on.
No, I think I'm good here. Is there anything or any questions that any of the listeners or viewers have out there? Like, I mean, I record my episodes. I don't have that opportunity to kind of do the little bit of the back and forth with like the live audience. So if anyone has anything to say or to present, I mean, I'd be more than happy to try to answer, anything negative, positive. I don't really give a damn.
Any comments, suggestions, positives, pros, any ideas on what anyone here wants to see next time? But if you stuck it out, thanks for coming. Very much appreciated. I always like a good discussion, and I'm glad some people came to this one because I know it's like in the other ones I had like one or two chatters, but more people seem to be coming to this one, so that's nice. It tells me that it's in some way a bit influential. Do I dare call myself an influencer? Well, that's not. It's one of those words, right? But yeah, so that is, that's all I wanted to discuss. I mean, there's a lot of things to possibly discuss in future podcasts. I notice I seem to do this every 4 months, and like I notice why, because my schedule is like
person recognition.
I'll do a podcast. Oh, Greasy, just comment on AI used for security cameras. Okay. AI used for security cameras and person recognition. Okay, so I do see that. That is something I'm familiar with. I believe it's used in China, where they will use AI on the public surveillance to basically identify people. Because otherwise a person would have to do it, right? A person would have to look through the footage and be like, that's him, that's her, that's them, and doing stuff. But with an AI, it could basically instantly tie you from your surveillance footage straight to who you really are, which is quite a scary prospect. It's very much the whole Big Brother is always watching kind of thing. And it's happening now. I can't deny that it isn't happening. So
we use it.
What are some thoughts? I'm glad I got a question, yes.
Yeah, we use that here as well. Security cameras in general, even just on my system, I have a native AI setup on my network that helps manage things of that nature. And the reality of the situation is cameras record and capture, and that's information. And that information is broken down into bits, zeros, ones, and things of that nature that a computer can process and understand. So it's going to be something that's coming, whether it be people that look like this tend to commit crimes, or people that have this type of facial structure or facial features tend to commit crimes. So you're going to be flagged or alerted when you walk into a store. That is here. That's something that a lot of stores currently use. It's not necessarily talked about and discussed openly because they don't want to scare off customers that don't want to be put into a system. But law enforcement, many high-end retail locations, all use that technology. And they do still have to have a person that acts as I guess kind of like an overseer of it, but it's here. It's being used.
Yes, it's definitely a scary prospect. But actually, I would like to expand upon that a little bit more in that I've seen kind of some of the opposite happening where there's the possibility of AI footage that didn't happen, right? This is completely AI generated, being used as real evidence because it is so convincing. Now, I personally haven't read any examples of it actually happening, but the prospect, the idea of it happening, AI footage, eventually getting to the point where it is so realistic, it is essentially undeniable. It's basically like you can't interpret it any different than real footage because it's just that damn convincing.
You always will be, especially when you break down the structure of a video. This is actually evident when people doctor or adulter images or things. Like, there are specialists out there that can see And to them, it looks a lot like the way AI art does to like the lame, myself.
Mhm.
It's kind of the same thing because there's just certain consistencies and inconsistencies that will exist in that file, that'll exist in that image, that will make it flag as AI. And in all honesty, you can actually use a different AI program to discover that that is an AI generated program as well.
Yeah,
So,
that's
yeah.
that I found particularly interesting. Like you could tie that back to what was the phrase I used? It was the inherent hypocrisy in ubiquity, I believe. I might be getting some of those words
Yes.
mixed up, but
No,
yeah.
that is correct.
Yeah, essentially, now in order to fight AI, you will need AI. Quite ironic, isn't it? Um,
It's Hellboy.
right?
It's Hellboy.
It's Hellboy, it's Blade, it's Attack on Titan even too. Use Titans to fight
Yes.
Titans. Um, isn't that interesting? Actually, almost off topic, but is there any kind of, because like I notice there's these stories a lot where you use the thing to fight the thing, vampires to fight vampires, titans to fight titans. Is there like one for AI yet? Like, has anyone written a story where it's like an AI hunter, but he is an AI himself or herself or itself?
I think the closest that would be, oh geez, was it DNA Hunter? There's like a 90s anime. I remember watching it. I don't remember if it was a series or an OVA or just like a single movie, but it was called DNA Hunter. And it was, or actually Ghost in the Shell.
Ah,
Ghost in the
yeah.
Shell.
Ghost in the Shell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ghost in the Shell would be a good example of it. But I do like the idea of that. Like it's, yeah, why do we always do that? Like, why is humanity not enough? Why do we always have to get the thing to fight the thing, but with a human heart, at its core, so to speak?
It's interesting. It's an interesting story concept. But yeah,
If you're ever open to like a full-on discussion on like the philosophy within anime,
oh yeah,
especially if
like breaking it down.
Yeah, 100%. We can pick a topic because they relate to the things that we have discussed in the past, whether it be based on power, and even something as, quote unquote kitty is like Sailor Moon
Mhm.
or Dragon Ball. All of those things have like much deeper, hidden meanings in it, especially when you look at the character names, where they come from. All of those things would be like a really fun,
Oh yeah.
just a thought experiment, as you mentioned earlier. That would just be a total thought experiment.
Oh yeah, I could see that. I'm kind of doing something like that already, but not to this level. Like I'm doing reaction stuff just for fun, because like, okay, off on a tangent. I don't really see the reactions I do as too artistic, so I put it on a separate channel called Big Top Reactions, where it's just it's just me doing it for fun. Yeah, I'm Joey in character, but I don't see the reactions as too artistic or anything like that. But I could see us doing like an anime reaction, where we would discuss it based on the things we already talked about in this podcast. Like, for example, Chainsaw Man, right? Like, I could see a lot of like, I could see a lot of discussion on power, not just the character power, but of course our discussion on power and identity of masculinity and femininity. Oh yeah, I said I was going to talk about masculinity and femininity in art. In that, because AI doesn't really have that, it can't really incorporate it in art. You just get the prompts. That's basically what I was going to say about it. You just get the prompts. Whereas, like, if you're an artist of whatever gender of an artist you are, you can use that to influence the art, and it's part of it, and it's not just a prompt. There's more to dissect in it, and you
There's
just
that piece
apply
of
what I said
you in
already.
it.
Yeah, essentially. So that's essentially what I wanted to talk about. I forgot it because I have so many notes. I completely forgot about that. I have so many notes about like stuff we talked about and things we were going to talk about. But yeah, other than that, that's pretty much everything about AI. And I appreciate the question, Greasy. Very interesting. We were able to expand upon it further. But yeah, I could definitely see us doing like anime breakdown, something like that. I'm not sure if I do it live because of the whole copyright thing, but I might put it on my reaction channel or maybe on my main channel, depending on, because that seems more artistic and more meaningful if we're talking about like the philosophy of an anime, breaking it down. That seems more meaningful than just like a reaction, because in a reaction it's just what I'm feeling in the moment. Like I did reactions to death battles, did reactions to videos and stuff like that. So yeah, I could definitely see that happening in the future.
Definitely. And one thing I just out of curiosity, when you get to like episode 15 or 30 of Monster, just do me a favor, just a quick breakdown of what you think of the show.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Because yeah, it's an interesting show that's got a lot of ups and downs, a lot of loops, a lot of twists and turns. And it does get repetitive after a while, but it makes sense in the end, so to speak.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely something I could do. So thanks for coming, Larry. Thanks to all my viewers out there for listening, providing questions, and jokes are also much appreciated. I see you, TR. AI more like AI. Very funny. But yeah, that is all for now. Appreciate for having me on the podcast, Larry. It has been thrilling, captivating, and very thought-provoking as always.
Definitely. It's always a good time. And I mean, to anyone out there, I'm Larry with the Civil Rhetoric Podcast. If you want to check out some of the previous episodes that I've done with Joey, once I get this video done being edited, I'll be sure to add them in the description so you can check them out. And one episode I think that kind of connects to this and the previous conversations we've had have been on things of masculinity, femininity, but also episode I've done with a specialist in terms of ayahuasca and mental expansion. And I think it'd be something that, would be able to resonate with everyone. I personally don't participate in that stuff, but I mean, hey, someone's out there. It makes sense to somebody.
It's useful information. Go check out Larry's podcast. But yes, that's going to be it for now. Thank you for coming, everybody, and good night. Take care.
Good night, everyone.
And I am offline.